I'm here with Jim Coleman, the spokesman for the Greg Ball 40th District Senate campaign for the state of New York. Greg. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Jim, we're here to talk. You're a Westchester resident. Mm-hmm. Greg's opponent is a Westchester County legislator.
Right.
And we were discussing some personal experiences you've had with the Westchester tax system.
Yeah.
You're a homeowner in Westchester?
I'm a victim of Tax Hike Mike.
Well, how have you been victimized?
I've been victimized. I'll tell you, my taxes, 5 years ago, they were $18,000. Today, they're $26,000. I went in and had a conversation with Tax Hike Mike about 3 days ago, and all of a sudden, Tax Hike Mike showed up in his office. He said, "Are you a constituent?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "You're not a constituent. You're not one of my constituents." I said, "You're absolutely wrong. You've increased my taxes from $18,000 to $26,000 in 5 years. I want you to do something about it. I want you to stop rubber stamping all the legislation that you've done in the past with Andy Spano and fighting for increases in my taxes and allow me to stay in my house versus having to move out or move and leave the state."
Well, how long have you lived in Westchester?
I've lived in Westchester since 1999.
I find it kind of surprising that he's a Westchester County legislator and he tells you that you're not one of his constituents.
He's outrageous. He's arrogant. He's a hypocrite. And Tax Hike Mike is just a lunatic. And all he does is he listens to the power brokers like Andy Spano in the past and to his own focus on increasing taxes and increasing spending. And he's just totally out of control. Now he wants to do that up in Albany, and we don't need that. New York's number one in all the wrong ways. The last thing we need is a Tax Hike Mike to go up there in Albany. It will be a meltdown if we let that happen.
Now, you've been, of course, actively campaigning with Greg these last several months during this campaign.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your experiences. Let's start from when the campaign began. Did you see it as an uphill fight, or did you see it as a fairly simple because of this message of fiscal irresponsibility in Albany and the necessity to restore it?
Well, Greg's a fighter. Bottom line is he does not report to all the power folks up there in Albany. He reports to the people. And when you do that, you're really going to have a target on your back. He's really pretty much as an assemblyman when he was up there fighting for us over the last 2 terms. He's been the skunk at the picnic. And the reason why is he does not take orders from a lot of bigwigs up there. He fights for what he believes in and what the people need back home.
Well, let me ask you something. I mean, he, I think unfairly is criticized that he's a do-nothing assemblyman, but I look at it a different way. I think Greg has taken the initiative and has had this bravery to introduce...
Absolutely.
I'll tell you right now, introduce legislation that other politicians won't.
Yep.
Whether or not it passes or not, I think the act
that most of them cut and run like a scalded dog.
Yeah, and the other thing is he stands up and he says what is true.
The first day on the floor of the assembly, when he became the assemblyman, he said this is the most dysfunctional assembly in the whole United States. And he's right on that. But he didn't make a lot of friends when he did that. Well, he stood up for against this ridiculous MTA tax.
Greg mentions that every once in a while, and I was actually there in the chamber. And the funny thing was that I was speaking to a few of the workers of some of the legislators in Albany, and we had a discussion. And they, of course, they were giving the party line. The party line about everything's okay. And after Greg gave that speech, the only people that were really booing were the politicians
themselves. That's exactly right.
And a lot of
on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and a lot of their assistants or whatever you want to call them that work there,
the workers,
they were nodding their heads.
Like, you know what? This place is a mess. It's a meltdown.
They agree
it's a
with
meltdown.
That.
It's one of the worst legislatures in the whole country.
Well, one of the problems in New York, and I'm sure when you're campaigning, a lot of people bring this up to you as an issue, besides the fiscal stuff, is we are shackled with career politicians here in the state of New York. We have the Sheldon Silvers or the Joe Brunos or
these
the
guys have been up there for
Bells.
20, 25, 30 years. They don't want to move. They wanted to have it as a part-time job. You've got a speaker up there that makes over $1 million a year in his own law firm. Now, this is what Tax Hike Mike wants. He wants a part-time job.
Let's talk about the speaker. I mean, the speaker has $1 million in retainers for doing nothing, essentially.
He does nothing. And this is really a part-time job, and he loves it because of the power. He makes these poor Democratic Assembly people they have to bow and scrape. He throws out a few crumbs to them, give them a couple $100,000 to go back home, to give $1,000 here and $1,000 there, and he just controls everything. And they just rubber stamp everything he wants to do.
Well, one of the big things that you've been campaigning for on behalf of Greg and what Greg has been touting is term limits.
We've got to have it. We've got to have it both at the chairmanship level as well as for the actual members. As you know, Assemblyman Ball is pushing right now and has signed a pledge that he would not want to serve more than 3 terms in the New York State Senate. On cameras, Tax Hike Mike, he says he's for it, but then when you hold him accountable for wanting to sign the pledge, like we did, I went down there, Wednesday, and I had a meeting right in Tax Hike Mike's office, had the pledge right there with me. He saw Assemblyman Ball's signature on the side. I said, why don't you just go on and sign this? He said, that's not government business. That's not government business. That's not. I said, how's it not government business? I'm here right now, and I'm asking you right now to hold yourself accountable and not to go up there and just be a long-term life politician. Mr. Coleman, if you're not a constituent, I said, how can you say I'm not a constituent? You increased my taxes from 18 to 26,000. The guy had a meltdown by me just simply asking him to just sign the pledge. The bottom line is I was down there, and the chicken, term limit chicken, he showed up.
I think we have the term
there
limit
he
chicken
is.
here.
There he is.
Look,
There he comes again. He's everywhere. He's everywhere. That's Tax Hike Mike right here.
Well, this is the pledge. And this is the pledge you brought with you.
I'll tell you right now, too. This is the pledge, and we need that Tax Hike Mike, and we need all the rest of those rascals up there to sign this pledge to say that we are not for a long-term, lifetime, part-time job.
And I'm going to read the pledge. It says, "I, the undersigned, pledge to the constituents of my district and all people of the state of New York that I will term limit myself at the lesser of," and I like it, 5 has been scratched out and 3 has been put in, 3 terms or 6 slashing out 10 years for each elected position held now or aspire to in the future, and that I will support all efforts to support term limit legislation in New York State.
This is basically,
why wouldn't you sign it?
This is a pledge for get a life. Go up there, serve your time, and move on. Let some fresh ideas come in and help to turn around this state.
Yeah, and chicken, has it been difficult to get him to sign?
It's unbelievable. This chicken is just running all over the place. And I'll tell you, I think, now he's ducking.
Thank you, chicken.
I'll tell you right now, Tax Hike Mike, he's ducking. So I guess next week, we're going to have to go down there and just take a duck with us. Because if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and continues a duck, I guess that's Tax Hike Mike next. He's a duck.
Must be a duck.
He must be. He must be.
Now, one final thing. You spend a lot of time on the phone.
Ton of time.
Talking to the voters. I'm sure you talk to voters of all parties.
We want Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Conservatives. The bottom line is we're all hurting. We're all just what I told you about my taxes. Whether Tax Hike Mike doesn't care what party are you in. He's going to raise your taxes. And Democrats, Independents, Conservatives, and Republicans have had same impact on their property taxes.
Yeah, I mean, Greg has said to me before that this campaign is not about social issues, which really is what divides the parties.
He tries to do that. He tries. Tax Hike Mike, he runs like a scalded dog on his record. You know good and well that since he was the budget chair over the last 12 years, he's increased spending and taxes by over $11 billion. That's outrageous. We are number one in all the wrong ways in Westchester County, all because of Tax Hike Mike and his legislation in the past. It's ridiculous, and we can't have that to go up there to New York. If we do not fight hard, and if we as the taxpayers don't stand up to prevent this maniac from going to Albany, this state is going to shut down. Out from Kentucky. I have a little small pig farm down in Kentucky where I grew up. I've got a safe haven to go to. If Tax Hike Mike and the rest of his crew goes up there and takes over this state, we have had it.
Well, I think people should listen to you because if you're a pig farmer, you know how pigs act. If you give them
pigs
all
get
they
fed,
want,
hogs get slaughtered, and we'll end up being the hogs because Tax Hike Mike will kill us. It'll be unbelievable. Nobody right now this morning down in South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida is waking up, just retired yesterday, Friday's last day of work, and said, "Honey, you know what? Let's just pack the bags. Let's get in the minivan and let's drive to New York so we can retire and enjoy the next 25, 30 years together."
It's the other way.
Everybody's heading away from New York. No good business out there. BMW, Mercedes, GM, Ford, Toyota, again, down in Georgetown, Kentucky, Toyota, they're down there. They're happy. There's no way they would say, you know what? I think we've got a good idea here. Why don't we move 3,000 jobs to New York? You know why? Because the regulations are too high, the taxes are too high, and the energy costs are too high. 70% higher than anywhere in the United States for energy costs. We're number one in taxes. Number one in regulations. You put a Tax Hike Mike, we're going to see pretty much it's going to be like a desert here in New York.
I remember the 90 corridor between Buffalo and Albany.
It's going to
loaded with
the tip of Manhattan.
Yeah.
And you know what? Tax Hike Mike,
it's a disaster now.
Tax Hike Mike, he's going to like it because he's a financial planner. And he's going to be able to help people go out there and say, you know what, I know you can't barely make it, but just pay me and I'll fix your plan. You know what? Tax Hike Mike, what he needs to do is lower taxes. And he hasn't done that. He's had a chance. He's had